I've questioned you and appealed to you about the issue of taxi drivers and the public transport system extensively, including today, and obviously, as we discussed earlier, a huge protest of taxi drivers. You've expressed sympathy, but you haven't given clear commitments, and I want to know, when are you going to make a decision on the key demands being made by taxi drivers, because they are desperate. They're incurring debts, they have virtually no income, they don't know whether to stay on the reducing PUP payment or go back to work where they can't possibly make a living and lose all of that payment, where insurance costs, repayments, licence renewal fees, car maintenance, fuel, all these costs and debts are clocking up. So when are you going to make a decision on their central request, which is for an income subsidy, where they can have a baseline income and then earn above that, knowing that there's not, until we have all health restrictions lifted, the capacity for them to make a full living? And by the way, the same question applies to the arts, music, live entertainment workers. They need to know, they need to get an answer on this central request. But also on the taxi drivers, I mean, there's some stuff that wouldn't even cost you anything, right? Stopping issuing taxi licence would cost you nothing. Extending the 10-year replacement rule to 12 years would cost you nothing. Getting rid of the Taxi Advisory Committee, which completely discredited, and having a national taxi transport forum would cost you nothing, with proper representation for the taxi drivers, where you could actually hear from them. So when are we going to get answers on these things? Lastly, on transport, there is, because of the 50% capacity rule on public transport, lots of people just don't want to get on it because they're frightened. There's a problem, right? So we need to dramatically increase capacity in public transport, and we have some of that capacity in terms of private buses and indeed our taxi friends who have no work. So what are we going to do to increase public transport capacity given the 50% restriction?
Deputy Boyd Barrett was first, isn't that correct? Correct. In relation to both taxi drivers and the PUP payment and the income subsidy. Now, by the way, I spoke with the Minister for Social Protection. There are some measures already where you, in the social protection scheme and code, where you can help out people in sectors, particularly in the arts sector, and she has been in communication with them. But I did say to you earlier, that is under consideration for a broader approach, perhaps in relation to that. And that's work on the way, obviously in preparation for the budget, but it's work on the way between the relevant ministers, and Minister Eamon Ryan is meeting again with the taxi representatives. I take your point in relation to some measures that don't cost money, but they do have wider implications. But nonetheless, you're talking about non-issuing of taxi licence, and you're also talking about the issue around we've supported the waiving of renewal schemes, the 10 year to 12 years. The 50% rule and on public transport, it's a public health provision. Public buses don't grow on trees. They're not that easily procured and produced, but there's huge effort underway at the moment to procure a lot of buses for the school routes to comply with the public health advice, and that takes time. But the public health is still very strong on the 50% rule in respect of public transport. But again, that's something we've had engagement with public health on, but they are of a view that should be maintained. In terms of the budget, Deputy Kelly, tomorrow the Minister of Finance and Public Expenditure will issue statements in terms of overall budgetary strategy, in terms of deficits and expenditure. The tax returns have been buoyant, which reflects the progressivity of the progressive tax system, which it is. But on one level, it also opens up that those on lower incomes have lost out more in terms of the fact that the tax base has remained, tax returns, particularly in corporation tax, has remained relatively solid, which is helping the overall financial situation. That said, there's been an unprecedented intervention in the economy, and people need to get real when they use language about awkward and clumsy and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's anything but. It's been unprecedented in scale and intervention. The government's only in place 12 weeks. 11 to 12 weeks. The wage subsidy scheme has been extended out to March, April. The pandemic unemployment has been extended out. Yes, the rates, but they're still relative to where people were earning before COVID. New entrants, it's opened up to new entrants. There's a whole range of suite of enterprise measures for restart grants and supports and taxation and so on for lots of people and enterprises. On the redundancy payments that Deputy Murphy raised, there's an issue here that we all have to face. What's our overarching priority? To protect employment. If you trigger that straight away, okay, you could end a number of enterprises overnight. Like the whole agenda in COVID is to try and get as many enterprises through COVID intact so that they can grow again post-COVID, employ the existing workforce that they have, and more if possible. That's I think, a laudable objective in itself. But there are limits to that, and it's only until November that it has been extended. And again, the budget will be a further financial intervention and support intervention in relation to certain sectors of the economy. And we're going to deal with it, particularly those that are mandated, if you like, because of public health advice, and will not enjoy the same income levels that they would have enjoyed if the advice was otherwise. On the, like you mentioned the Green Party, Deputy Kelly, in terms of if you look up the website, I understand the TII, the timeline for the M20 was 5 years in terms of getting to, all the planning, design stages, all of that. No, that's where it was. And people deliberately distort statements that are made. That is actually the factual position, because I remember checking it during the programme for government when a deputy came out and we checked, and actually that was the timeline that was in the TII website alone in relation to M20, and it is committed to, and it is going ahead.
Taoiseach, just answer, please.
The Deputy Whitmore, it is, as I said to Deputy Kelly, the NEFID have advised that people in Dublin should not travel outside of Dublin if possible. That's the advice that they've given so far. Obviously, people working and so on will continue working in and out. That will continue. The full value of the wage subsidy should be paid to employees, and I'll check out that in relation to Aer Lingus. I think Deputy Barry has raised that, and Deputy Murphy has raised that. I think I've dealt with most issues.
Thank you.